What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in on today's video. We are taking a break from old Blue back there, and we are jumping onto the 2017 6.7. We're going to be talking. I actually ran into a little bit of a problem. We had a coolant leak, and so I thought it was a good opportunity. I'm going to be talking about some very common coolant leak locations, what to look for if your truck is losing coolant. Let's talk about what our truck was leaking, why it was leaking, where it was leaking, what we did to fix it, and then we'll get into some other really common locations on these 6.7 Fords. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's get into it. So I would say in all the years that I've been messing with these trucks, the number one location that I have seen these trucks leak coolant is related to the upper radiator hose and the thermostat housing. So as you can see, that is exactly what my truck was doing. We actually had a coolant leak, primarily coming from this end where the factory hose slips over. It is a quick connect, and you can see they've got this little band here that clicks when you install it. There is an O-ring in the factory radiator hose, and that O-ring, just over time from heat cycles, I've replaced just the O-ring and still had a leak. I think there's something that happens to the plastic itself, and so typically when you replace or when you have a coolant leak, I really like to just do the whole upper radiator hose on your truck. That way we don't have to worry about anything, and that seems to take care of the problem. I've had them leak at this O-ring. I've also had them leak at the O-ring where this guy goes down and meets to your thermostat housing. That O-ring will also leak. On top of all of that, you have a thermostat housing that the radiator hose attaches to, and that thermostat housing, the thermostat seal, is what seals the housing to the crossover, coolant crossover deal. I have seen those thermostat gaskets, usually on the earlier trucks, not so much on these later style trucks, but I have seen those gaskets leak as well. Corrosion, the gasket, for whatever reason, they get kind of hard. They see a lot of heat cycles, guys, constantly going up to temp, cooling down, going up to temp, cooling down. And so we decided to go with the pusher coolant hose here. Pretty nice. I don't mind it. Of course, we had to get it in the gray. Yes, sir. So that's probably going to be the theme. We're going to be doing some modifications up here as well, and we're going to stick with this nice gray color that pusher offers. I was kind of bummed. S&B, they're my go-to guys, but S&B has not released their upper coolant hose, and of course mine started leaking before they released it. So anyways, we've got the pusher set up here. Hopefully this thing never fails, doesn't give us any problems. You guys will be the first one to know, so thank you guys for being here. Let's jump into the second location that these suckers are really common to leak coolant. So this second one here is mainly for the 2011 to 2014 guys, and that is because Ford figured out that they screwed up and they went to a different design in 2015. They went to an entirely different turbo design, as a matter of fact, and so they got rid of these stupid little fittings that are they just pour coolant whenever they decide to leak. So anyways, let's show you guys what I'm talking about. Like I said, 11 to 14, and then we're going to show you what Ford has changed to take care of that problem. But for you 11 to 14 guys, take a look at these things because it's probably leaking. So imagine that your 6.7 turbo does have coolant that flows through it, and this fitting right here, this is the fitting that actually screws into the turbo on the 11 to 14 trucks. This is the line. You can see a nice little edge there, and that pops into this fitting. These are very prone to leaking, and you will typically see, sometimes you see coolant on the ground, sometimes you get a smell of coolant as it is burning off of the turbo itself or in the valley, and it's burning off in the valley. One really good way to know if this sucker is leaking is you're going to want to grab a mirror, and I'll show you guys what we do. All right, so you can see I've got my extendo mirror here going on, and we're just going to take a look right there. We're actually taking a look at the back side of the turbo a little bit. You can see this fitting if I can get it in the light here. Looking at the mirror. See if we can get it to focus. That guy right there. So on the early model year trucks, instead of having a bolt, and you can see that fitting going directly into the turbo, you guys are going to have that quick connect fitting. And what you'll usually see is a bunch of caked on burnt coolant. It gets kind of crusty, and you'll see it kind of crust up around that fitting. You know, it'll be kind of a orange or pink color. And then this is the revised design by Ford as soon as they went to the newer style turbos in 2015. It's actually a bolt-in fitting. It's all part of the same line. So you basically just have one part. And then there's an O-ring. So where that guy goes into the turbo, there is an O-ring there. And I have yet to see one of these guys leak. So nice job by Ford to take care of this little issue that was very prone on the 11 to 14 trucks. By the way, guys, did you guys see this little tool here? This little sucker is really neat for draining the coolant on these trucks. Those little drain cocks that they have on these things are a real pain to get to, and they can be kind of stiff to turn. And there's two of them. Yes, your truck has two cooling systems. But the second one for the secondary cooling system is even trickier to get to. But this guy right here makes it an absolute breeze. And I'll tell you, a local guy made this, and if you guys are interested, definitely drop a comment, let me know, because it's kind of a necessity to have, I tell you, if you're going to be working on your own 6.7. So let's move on to the number 3 location. There's really only so many locations that these things are really common to leak, and usually when your truck comes in with a coolant leak, we're going to be checking all these spots. So let's check the number 3 location. Yep, it's going to be the radiator. So let's take a look at where we like to see those leak. Now, this particular coolant leak, you typically will start to get drips on the ground when it gets severe enough, and you will get drips on the ground right in these front corners. So there and over here. They do like to leak these radiators. They have plastic end tanks on them. Get up underneath here, so you can see that is the corner. You can see the drain petcock there. These plastic end tanks, they will eventually leak. I've seen some trucks with very low mileage come in leaking. I've seen trucks with over 300,000 miles, and they're still on their original radiator. So I'm going to kind of dive into the rhyme or reason, but anyways, yeah, this is where you're going to want to look, and you'll see basically some dampness where that plastic end tank meets the metal part of the radiator. That is a really good tall tale sign that your radiator is indeed leaking. Now, if your radiator is leaking, the next thing you're going to want to check are your cab bushings, which, if you notice, mine here, actually, mine are deteriorating. Yay. See that? See how mine's coming apart on the bottom? Yep, that's no bueno. So typically what I see when I find a radiator that is leaking, I always take a look at the cab bushings, and 9 times out of 10, the cab bushings are smoked, especially the 11 to 2016 trucks. You guys are definitely going to want to take a look at all of your cab bushings and see if those need to be done, or else you might end up with a repeat failure of your radiator. That is the top isolation for the radiator when your truck is flexing. It adds a little bit of cushion, and so when your cab bushings are deteriorated, like mine are, eventually you'll end up with a radiator leak, and yeah, it's no bueno. Now you can see, so the 11 to 16s, it's all the same type material that they use for all the cab bushings. So if you've got a crew cab, you've got 4 on each side, total of 8, and yeah, it's all the same material, so you're going to want to check all of them. Now, if you have a 17 to 19, you just got to check the front cab bushings. So they use the same trash material in the front of these trucks, the front cab bushings, but they've got a much better design in the rear parts of the cab bushings. And I don't know why. I don't know why they didn't just put the nicer material in these front ones, but nonetheless, as you can see, they still fail, Ford. So Yeah, S&B is the go-to for cab bushings. The silicone body mounts are phenomenal. I've installed a bunch of them, and they do make just the front two for these 17 to 19 trucks. And so that is on the agenda for this big girl, is to get those front cab bushings taken care of before we end up with a radiator leak. All right, so I forgot what number we're on, but we're going to be taking a look at the next most common coolant leak location for these 6.7 Fords, and that is going to be the water pump. I'm going to show you guys kind of the angle that you got to look at the weep hole, because that is typically where they leak. They don't normally leak from the actual gasket where they seal to the front cover. They typically leak out of the weep hole, and so I'm going to try to get eyes on that, and then kind of show you guys what you usually see underneath the truck. That is pretty good intuition that you need to try to get eyes on that weep hole. So let's go and roll underneath the truck. All right, guys, so we're up underneath the truck here. We are on the driver's side. So that is our sway bar link. This is our pitman arm. This is our drag link. You can see the very first pulley that we can see right here. That is your water pump pulley. Now, Ford has made this very difficult for us because they do have this power steering hose that connects here. They've got this wiring tray that drops down along here as well. And it covers up a lot of the water pump. And you have to remove all of these things to get to the water pump to replace it. But if you think that your water pump is leaking, you're going to have some coolant that's coming down this front driver's side corner of the engine. When you get up underneath the truck, what you're going to want to look for on the water pump is this very bottom boss right here. What I'm touching with my pick there. That boss right there, up this way, is where the weep hole is. Now, it's going to be really hard for me to show with the camera, but that is where you're going to see coolant, what looks like residual coolant coming out of that location. You're going to see it kind of running down the back side of that and then coming down. You might even see crustiness from dried out coolant that's kind of been burnt on in that location. The other thing I will add is sometimes you can take your finger and get it up into that pulley on the back side and kind of hook it up in there, and you'll find some coolant inside of it, or you'll find crustiness, coolant crustiness inside of that pulley. All very good tall tale signs that your water pump is leaking. This coolant leak is not to be confused with this particular hose, your lower radiator hose here. Very rarely do I see these leak. They do leak. I have seen a couple, but it is rather rare. And yes, this is the exact same design as the upper coolant hose in relation to the fact that there is an O-ring inside of that coolant hose. But for whatever reason, it's probably the orientation. I never really see these leak. But like I said, that's how you want to check to see if your water pump is indeed leaking. In reality, guys, we can't really be too upset at some of these coolant leaks. We are working these trucks. They are seeing a lot of heat cycles. I'm not a huge fan of the O-rings and the radiator hoses. They've been issues with, they had issues with the 6.4s. As soon as they started using that style, they've had issues on 6.7s. The 6 liters, tried and true, never really had a problem with the radiator hoses. They did have problems with the thermostat housing, and they did have problem with those constant tension clamps. But outside of that, really no problems with just your standard radiator hose and a clamp. But, you know, as we get into newer things and ease of accessibility and removal and everything like that, for whatever reason, that is the new thing to do for these OE manufacturers, is these O-ringed radiator hoses that snap on. Now, when I was underneath there and I showed you guys the lower radiator hose, that's not so common. There are two other not so common leaks, but we do see them leak. And I want to show you guys those two little locations. These ones are ones that you're not really going to see coolant hitting the ground at all. But you will see your coolant level dropping. So every time you pull it in for an oil change, every 5,000 miles or whatever, you're going to see your primary radiator has been dropping. And you're like, what is going on? Check these locations out. This one kind of cracks me up a little bit because you 6'4" guys are going to know what I'm talking about. But that fitting right there, yes, sir, that is another, oh my gosh, this light is almost too bright. So that fitting coming out of the degas bottle, there is an O-ring on that hose, and yes, eventually it will leak, and that is a not so common location that we see the 6.7s leak. Very common on 6.4s to leak there, and I would assume that as the mileage goes up on these 6.7s, the age goes up on these 6.7s, we will start to see more and more of these leaking at that location. On top of that, this spider mess that they have of coolant hoses right here with these crimped on clamps like this. I really like these crimped on clamps. The only downside, for some reason on the 17 to 19 trucks, these leak. I don't know. I don't know why. It's like they didn't crimp them enough. I don't know. But I see very common for these to leak, and usually you will see coolant coming through the hose, and you'll see like a little, like a chia pet type thing going on, you know? So you can see there's glue coming out of that hose, but what you will eventually see is possibly dried up, crusty coolant coming out of the hose. And at that point, no, you don't need to replace the clamp, you need to replace the actual hose. So, some not so common coolant leak locations to double check. If you go to change the oil on your truck and you look at your reservoir and there ain't nothing in it, check these spots. Now, somebody's going to mention the intercooler. So your secondary cooling system, okay, it cools not only your transmission, but it also cools the intercooler for the water to air intercooler for the turbo. Yes, I have seen a few of those leak internally, and you will see your secondary cooling system drop, and then you'll see your transmission temperatures go up. That's a really good tall tale sign. However, I've never really seen that on the 17 to 19 trucks, even really the 15, 16 trucks. Most common on the 11 to 14 trucks, I have seen those leak. Now, is that because of age, mileage? I don't know. Will we see that issue on the 17 to 19 trucks? I don't know. But make sure you guys are dropping a comment. Let me know what you guys think. And if I'm missing something, are you guys seeing another coolant leak that I missed here? Let me know. Drop a comment. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys are interested in that fancy little tool that I showed you guys for draining the coolant, let me know. Drop a comment. Let me know. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Stay tuned. We got more 6.7 content coming your guys' way. Like, subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.